In the quiet corners of a small town, where life seemed to move slowly, there lived a woman named Emily. Her world was surrounded by the comfort of books, the kind of place where people sought solace and knowledge. Emily had spent the past few years running a small bookshop in the town square, a peaceful routine that often felt more like an obligation than a joy. She loved her books, and they filled the void of her loneliness. But even among the pages of the stories she read, something was missing. She longed for more, a deeper connection, something that would pull her from the monotony of her life and make her feel truly alive. It was one chilly autumn afternoon, as Emily closed up the shop, that her life would change in a way she never expected. The wind was crisp, rustling the golden leaves that swirled around the cobblestone streets. She wrapped her scarf around her neck tightly, preparing for the brisk walk home. As she passed a broken street lamp, a sudden sound caught her attention. At first, she thought it was the wind, but then she saw it. A small, scruffy dog huddled on the cold pavement, its ribs clearly visible beneath its matted fur. The dog's large, sorrowful eyes followed every movement she made, full of quiet desperation. Her heart sank at the sight. The dog was clearly malnourished, weak, and perhaps abandoned. It hadn't eaten in days, maybe even weeks. A mixture of sadness and anger filled Emily's chest. How could anyone leave this creature to suffer alone? She stood frozen for a moment, torn between wanting to help and fearing the responsibility that might come with it. The town was small, and people didn't usually wander far from their daily routines, so the thought of taking in a stray dog felt both strange and overwhelming. But as Emily hesitated, something unusual happened. The dog, despite its obvious exhaustion and hunger, didn't flee. Instead, it lifted its head slightly and gave a faint wag of its tail. It was a fragile gesture, as though this small act of kindness still held some hope, despite everything it had endured. Emily knelt down slowly, trying not to startle the dog. "Hey, buddy," she whispered softly. "Where did you come from?" The dog remained motionless, too weak to respond. As Emily looked closer, she noticed an old frayed rope loosely tied around the dog's neck. It was a sign that the dog had once belonged to someone, but now it was alone, left to fend for itself on the unforgiving streets. Her heart ached as she gently scooped the dog into her arms. It was lighter than she expected, its frail body barely resisting her touch. She whispered softly as she cradled the dog, "I'm taking you home. We'll get you cleaned up and fed. You'll be okay." The walk home was a quiet one, but for Emily, it felt like a turning point. She had no idea that this simple act of kindness would not only change the life of the dog, but would also impact her in ways she could never have imagined. When Emily arrived home, she carefully placed the dog on a soft blanket by the fireplace. The warmth of the room contrasted sharply with the chill from the outside world. The dog blinked slowly, his eyes adjusting to the new surroundings. He didn't make a sound, only watching Emily with a mix of curiosity and exhaustion. His fur was a tangled mess of dirt and grime, and his body trembled from both hunger and fear. Emily knelt beside him, her voice soft as she prepared some food. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" she murmured, her heart breaking for this. Poor creature. She placed a small bowl of water beside him. At first, the dog sniffed it cautiously, his body too weak to react quickly. After a moment, he began to drink, taking slow, deliberate sips. It was clear that the dog wasn't accustomed to kindness, and every gentle gesture from Emily seemed to surprise him. After he had finished drinking, Emily offered him soft pieces of chicken that she had cooked quickly. He hesitated at first, sniffing the food, as if unsure whether to trust it. But hunger quickly overtook his skepticism, and he devoured the meal with an urgency that made Emily's heart ache. As the days passed, Emily took care of the dog, whom she named Max. She watched as he slowly regained his strength, but there was something about him that intrigued her. He wasn't just a regular dog. He seemed almost too intelligent, as if he understood every word she said. His eyes followed her every move, not with the weariness of a stray, but with a soulful understanding that unsettled her at times. One evening, as she was brushing out the tangles in Max's fur, she noticed a scar on his neck beneath the remnants of the old rope. It looked like he had been tied up for a long time, maybe even abused. The thought made her blood boil. "Who could do this to you?" she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Max looked up at her then, his eyes filled with both sorrow and gratitude. They locked onto hers in a way that almost made her believe he was trying to communicate something. Max's transformation was remarkable. His coat became shiny, his body stronger. He was no longer the frail, starving dog she had found on the street. But what stood out most was his loyalty. Max never left her side. He followed her to the bookstore every morning and patiently waited as she worked. Customers often commented on how well-behaved and gentle he was. "He's special," one elderly woman remarked, stroking Max's head. "There's something in his eyes, like he's seen things we wouldn't understand." Emily couldn't deny it. Max wasn't just a dog. He was a companion, a protector, and a mystery. One evening, as they walked home from the bookstore, Emily noticed something strange. Max, usually calm and composed, had tensed up. His ears pricked up as they passed a narrow alleyway, and he let out a low growl, something he rarely did. Emily, concerned, tightened her grip on his leash. "Max, what is it?" she asked, peering into the shadows. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, a man with a ragged coat and wild eyes. He stumbled toward them, mumbling incoherently. Emily's heart raced as she realized the man was intoxicated and possibly dangerous. His gaze locked onto her, and he stepped closer. "Spare some change?" he slurred, his voice low and threatening. Emily took a step back, her pulse quickening. "I'm sorry, I don't have any cash," she said. But the man didn't back off. His demeanor grew more aggressive. "I said spare some change," he demanded, stepping closer. Before Emily could react, Max lunged forward, placing himself between her and the stranger. His once gentle eyes burned with intensity as he growled, baring his teeth. The man froze, his face paling before he muttered, all right," and stumbled backward, disappearing into the shadows. Emily dropped to her knees, her hands shaking as she wrapped her arms around Max's neck. "You saved me," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You really saved me." Max nuzzled her gently, his eyes filled with trust and loyalty. That night, Emily couldn't stop thinking about how Max had instinctively protected her. There was more to him than she had realized. He wasn't just a stray dog. He was her guardian. The next morning, Emily decided to take Max to the local vet just to make sure he was in good health. Dr. Harper, the kind veterinarian, scanned Max carefully for a microchip, but didn't find one. However, she did notice something odd. "This kind of mark," she said, pointing to the scar on Max's neck. "It's common in dogs that have been used for illegal purposes, like underground fights or as guard dogs for criminals." Emily's stomach churned. "Are you saying Max could have been abused?" she asked, her voice trembling. Dr. Harper nodded gently. "It's possible, but it's also clear that he trusts you completely now. Whatever his past was, he's found safety with you." Emily left the vet's office with a heavy heart, determined to give Max the best life possible. But she couldn't shake the feeling that his past was more complicated than she knew. Later that week, while organizing books in her shop, Emily noticed a man standing outside. He was wearing a black coat and dark sunglasses, and something about him felt off. Max noticed him too. He growled softly from his spot by the counter, and Emily felt a chill run down her spine. The man entered the shop, scanning the room before. His eyes landed on Max. "Nice dog," he said, his voice low and unsettling. "Thank you," Emily replied, forcing a smile. "Can I help you find a book?" The man shook his head, never taking his eyes off Max. "No, just passing through," he said before turning and leaving. As the door closed behind him, Emily's unease grew. She knelt beside Max, stroking his fur. "Do you know him?" she whispered. Max licked her hand, his eyes full of trust and reassurance. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with thoughts of Max's past and the man in the shop. Who was he? And why had he reacted so strongly to Max? The next morning, she woke up to find Max sitting by the front door, alert and tense. He barked once, a deep warning sound that made Emily's heart skip a beat. She peered through the window and saw the man from the shop standing across the street, watching her house. Emily decided to report the man to the police. When Officer Daniels arrived, he listened carefully to her story. "This dog," he said, looking at Max, "he matches the description of a stolen guard dog from a crime ring we've been investigating." Emily's heart pounded in her chest. "What do I do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Stay alert and keep your dog close," Officer Daniels advised. "He's clearly attached to you and he'll protect you." Emily hugged Max tightly, tears welling in her eyes. "You've already saved me once," she whispered. "We'll get through this together." As the days passed, life slowly returned to normal. Emily kept Max close, and the bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. Max, once a frightened stray, now walked with confidence, knowing he had found a forever home. But despite the warmth of their bond, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that danger still lurked just beyond her door. The man in the black coat hadn't returned, but his presence remained etched in her memory. One afternoon, as Emily prepared to close her bookshop, the doorbell chimed. She looked up and saw Officer Daniels standing in the doorway, his expression grave. "We've been monitoring the man who was watching your house," Officer Daniels said, his voice low. "He's part of an organized crime ring we've been tracking for years. He's been asking questions about a dog that matches Max's description." Emily's heart sank. Why would they want him back? He's just a dog. "Not just any dog," Daniels replied. "Max was trained as a guard dog for high-level criminals. They probably think he knows too much, and if they can't get him back, they'll want to eliminate him." Emily's hands trembled as she knelt beside Max. "You've been through so much," she whispered, stroking his fur. "I won't let them take you." Officer Daniels offered a reassuring smile. "We'll keep you both safe. We've already taken steps to ensure that the man in the black coat won't bother you again." In the days that followed, life slowly returned to normal. Emily kept Max close, and their bond grew stronger. Max, once a frightened stray, now walked with confidence, knowing he had found his forever home. But despite the warmth of their bond, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that danger still lurked just beyond her door. The man in the black coat hadn't returned, but his presence remained etched in her memory. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Emily whispered, "You saved me more than once, Max. I don't know how to repay you." As Emily sat beside the fireplace stroking Max's fur, she realized that their bond was stronger than anything she could have ever imagined. Max had gone from being a starving, abandoned dog to her loyal protector, showing her a kind of love and trust that words couldn't describe. In that moment, she knew that their journey together had only just begun. Max was no longer just a dog. He was family. A family forged through hardship, love, and an unbreakable connection. What would you do if you found an animal in need just like Emily did? If you were moved by Max and Emily's story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more heartwarming tales that inspire and remind us of the power of kindness. Share this story with your friends and let's spread love and compassion together. Thank you for watching, and remember, every act of kindness counts.